Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of the Monsters Den. Speaking of den, we are in the lair of this guy over here.
Hey, everybody.
Chris Allo is in the house. Actually, he is in his house. I'm in his house as well. We are here to talk about some bad movies today. Bad horror films. You know, that type of horror film that's so bad that it's so much fun. All right? Yeah, I don't think, other than horror, is there any other genre where you could say that about a film?
With certain things.
Maybe
and,
comedies, maybe.
I was going to say, there's absolutely a difference between a bad movie and a good bad movie, meaning that a good bad movie, there's something that's still enjoyable.
Yeah, sure.
That you personally find enjoyable. Like, I know a lot of people love that movie, The Room, from, 10, 15 years ago, and I've never been able to get through it. It's yes, it's a bad movie, but for me, it's boring. I want
sucks, yeah.
car crashes or boobs or explosions or monsters. Something to entertain me. Yeah. And
I think the worst kind of horror movie is a boring horror movie.
Yes, 100%.
Right?
100%. Yeah. If you're not entertained, then there's no point.
No, none at all. So we've each tasked ourselves with going through our vast libraries of horror films to pick out 3 each that are pretty bad, but we get some kind of enjoyment out of it, right? So, and we're going to talk about why. So, Chris is going to kick us off with his first choice here.
Okay, cool. My first choice, I think I have the DVD. I should have looked for it, but this is the Blu-ray. It's based on a book, which is unbelievable that somebody wrote this as a book, and then it blows my mind that somebody made this as a motion picture. It's got a great cast: Stuart Whitman, Janet Leigh from Psycho, Rory Calhoun from Motel Hell, DeForest Kelley from Star Trek, and I remember watching this movie on Joe Bob Briggs' Monster Vision in like the early 90s because I'd always wanted to see it, and I watched it, and it was universally praised as a good bad movie. I just thought it was bad because on Monster Vision they cut out all the gore. But it is surprisingly gory, but it is not scary at all. The movie I'm talking about is Night of the Lepus, which you can't tell by the poster, and that's the original poster art. And if you haven't heard of it, it's about a bunch of killer bunny rabbits. I'm not making this up. If you haven't heard of this movie, look it up. And it's awful. Because the acting's not great, the directing's fine, but it's bunny rabbits, and there's only a few shots where it's puppets of like the bunny rabbit faces. Most of the time, it's just slow motion photography of these fluffy, cuddly bunny rabbits. And they shot them in slow motion with like little models, like a Godzilla movie, to make it look like the bunnies were big. But there is no way to make a real bunny rabbit scary. There's just no way.
No.
Every time they're on screen, I just want to pick them up and pet them. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But it's laughable because it's so bad, and it's a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend the new Blu-ray. There's trailers and running commentaries. I had the DVD from a few years ago, and so I had to upgrade it. And this is the definition of a good bad movie, and it's got all the gore in it, which surprisingly, it's fairly bloody for like 1972. And sometimes you don't see the attacks, but you find the aftermath. And it's like whole families that were eaten by bunnies, including like little kids. So it's a crazy movie. The little girl in this movie is one of the creepiest little girls I'd ever seen. Sorry, I mean she's probably like 50 years old now. But anyway, it's a hoot. It's a good bad movie, and Night of the Lepus.
A horror turkey, right?
Oh, for sure.
So speaking of turkeys, my first choice is from 1972. This is like probably one of the most bizarre movies I've ever seen in my life. Something prompted me to buy this back, however long ago I picked this up, and I don't remember seeing this back in the day when I was a kid. And I rewatched it again the other day, and I'm like,
how's it hold up?
It's still one of the weirdest films I've ever seen in my life. I'm talking about Blood Freak. from 1972. So yeah, the reason I mentioned turkeys before is because this is about a guy who turns into a murderous turkey man.
Right.
So, and I don't know whether this film was supposed to be like an anti-drug film or a Christian film, because it's got elements of both in it. The premise of this is that the movie starts off, you got this kind of...
Oh, Pete?
Yes.
Oh, shit. Do you need the wire? The Wi-Fi wire?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
No, we're just recording.
Can you fix that then?
Yeah.
All right.
We're good. He got worried. He's like, oh, oops.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, Jesus. That's why I unplugged it. I thought we had a... Okay.
Yeah, right. No, it'll be played later. So, anyway, back to the film. Yeah. So it starts off with this guy, this motorcycle guy, right? This biker dude who apparently is just fresh out of Vietnam. And he's, riding. He's got his blue helmet and this bright colored jacket and vehicle. He's a big brawny guy. And he's riding his bike down the road and he sees sees this really sexy woman driving her car, and they're eyeing each other, whatever. Then a couple miles down the road, she's at the side of the road with the car broken down, right? So he goes to help her. He assists her, and she's like, oh, why don't you come back to the house and come hang out and whatever. He's like, oh, all right, I got nothing else to do. He's fresh out of Vietnam, right? So he's got nothing going on. And they go back to this house, and here's this collection of people that are hanging out that are all doing drugs. There's 3 old people, a younger, equally hot chick who's her younger sister, it turns out, and a couple other people, and they're all sitting, smoking joints, doing coke and all this stuff, and the biker guy is like, oh, I'm not into all that stuff. So the chick whose car broke down, she starts talking all this religious stuff. And he's like, what's all this about? The younger one is coming on to him. Meanwhile, the reason he went back is because he's attracted to the oldest sister.
Okay.
And he's making, he's telling everybody who's doing the drugs, he's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, whatever. Next thing you know, the older sister is introducing him to her father, who owns a turkey farm. And he's like, oh, I'm actually looking for help. You want to come and, get a job and, we'll do blah, blah. He goes, oh, yes, that'd be great, whatever. And I'm thinking, does this guy live anywhere? Is he just dry? He's got no luggage, no nothing.
He's like Rambo. He's just drifting
around, right? So next thing you know, so he's working on the turkey ranch and then doing whatever. And then there's a scene where he's cleaning around the pool and the younger sister is there in her bikini and she's trying to seduce him and whatever. Next thing you know, they're in the room going at it, right? And you're like, all right, what's going on? She gets him to start smoking a little bit of weed. Next thing you know,
and that's when he turns?
Soon. But then he's smoking weed all the time. And then, this other weird scene, it's his first day on the job, he goes into the lab. Why there's a lab on a turkey farm, I have no idea. And there's these 2 scientists, one older guy and one younger guy. He looks like a total doofus. And they ask him, it's like, oh, you're the new guy. Oh, so we're doing these new experiments using, turkey meat and all this kind of stuff and all these kind of experimental drugs and things like that. Would you be interested in earning a few extra dollars to, try this turkey meat, whatever. And he's like, oh, so I'm going to be your guinea pig? Well, just for a little bit, see how it goes, whatever. So part of this whole process is that they would give him cooked turkeys that have been injected with whatever it is they're doing. So then between him eating the turkey meat and smoking the weed, he starts going into these convulsions. And it's the weirdest thing because they would randomly go to the scene of him laying on the ground, shaking like crazy. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then shortly thereafter, he turns into a turkey.
Wow.
Man. But crazy enough, it's he's just got this turkey helmet. The rest of him looks like a total guy. Yeah. It's almost
that was in the budget,
right? Exactly. It's almost like Lon Chaney when he, back in the early Wolfman days, he would turn into the Wolfman, but he would still be wearing the button-down shirt and the belt and the shoes and all that kind of stuff. So here he is, and then all of a sudden he randomly starts going out and killing people so now he's addicted to both the pot and to the turkey meat.
Wow.
And then he turns into, when the moon is full, he turns into this turkey man. And, the killings are crazy because obviously they had no budget. And there's this one scene where he kills this woman and turns her upside down and slits her throat. But the funny thing is, it's you see a close-up of him and he's got some kind of screwdriver or something. And they show a close-up of him going in to inject the screwdriver. and yet then she's hung upside down, and she's bleeding out from underneath her shirt.
Oh God!
And it's just like it looks like it's just running down, like there's there's like a tube in there or something like that. And then he goes and he cups his hand underneath to catch the blood, and he starts drinking the blood. Meanwhile, and they did this like 3 times in this film, the woman screaming, it's like they had her scream on a loop. So she's like, ah!
That's funny.
Over and over and over again for like 5 minutes.
Wow.
And they did this like 3 times in the film with every kill. There's another scene where he takes like a blade saw, hacks off this guy's leg. And what I read is that they actually went out and found a guy who had only one leg.
No shit. Wow, that's awesome.
But the acting is atrocious, and then it's just it's just so bad throughout this film. And there's a little bit of gore, but they don't really show you a hell of a lot. The acting is just absolutely awful. And then there's just this whole demented thing of this like stoned out guy turning into a turkey.
Okay.
Turkey or whatever, I think what they call it. But then at the end of the film, I probably should.
I was gonna say,
I'm not going to give the end of the film. The end of the film is just as bizarre as the rest.
Seen to be believed.
It needs to be seen to be believed, and it's just. And then you've got this. I guess he was the producer or director of the film. He's this older guy. Periodically during the movie, they cut to a shot of him sitting at a table, smoking cigarettes, and just talking about this whole story. And at one point during the film, it's like he's talking and he starts coughing. And clears his throat and then continues talking. It's like you couldn't edit that out.
Couldn't do a second take.
Second take. It's one of those type of films.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just like, is it like anti-drug? But then the whole rest of the film is him, and he's just, and there's another scene where he's demanding more drugs. So finally, someone hooks him up, and he's like smoking this joint like it's crack or something like that. Like he's going through withdrawals. It's just really weird.
Wow.
Really weird. So it sounds like you haven't seen this.
I was gonna say now, my buddy James. Hey, James. Huge fan of Something Weird Video. Yeah. Huge fan of weird horror movies and of drug movies. So he's a big fan of this. I believe he gave me a copy of this a couple years ago. And I know I watched it. But I might have been drunk at the time because I really don't remember it.
You probably should be drunk to watch this.
But, James always loved it. And after Pete's description, I'm sold. I know it's in my collection. I gotta watch it again because I don't remember a thing about it.
It is the weirdest movie I've ever seen in my life. It's like Chris...
And it's one of those movies, we just had Thanksgiving, and of course, these are all these movies are turkeys, but that's definitely one, obviously, with the turkey connection.
It is.
People always mention, like, there's not many Thanksgiving horror movies to watch, but that's one of them.
It's notorious for a reason. It's just... But, it's one of those movies, it's so batshit crazy that you can't take your eyes off of it because you're in amazement at what is actually going on here. I mean, the script is like there is no script, and it defies all sorts of logic, but yet it's just so weirdly kind of intoxicating that you like. Again, I own it, so obviously I own it for a reason. I've kept it for a reason, but definitely one of those so out there movies that you just have to see.
Yeah, one of those needs to be seen to be believed.
Yeah, definitely.
Which definitely describes this next movie that I'm gonna bring up, and this movie was my buddy Mike Gingold from Fangoria magazine. When I was doing the Hudson Horror Show film festival in the Hudson Valley, we would have all sorts of vendors that would sell merchandise. So somebody was selling a bootleg DVD of a movie I had heard of but never seen, which was called Scream for Help. It's from I want to say 83, I think, 84. And Mike Ingold was like, you have to see this movie. So I bought this bootleg DVD, and I did what I do lots of times. I put it on the shelf, and I never watched it. And then a bunch of years later, I was at the Exhumed Films 24-hour Horrorthon, which is the greatest show on earth, and they showed this movie, and I could not believe what I saw. And it just recently came out on Blu-ray. Here's the Blu-ray from Shout Factory.
Who is that? She looks familiar.
I think she's from soap opera.
Okay.
Because the cast, they're mostly soap opera people. But the crew is fucking unbelievable. And, a lot of times on running commentaries for movies, they always say, nobody sets out to make a bad movie. And, I mean, with this crew, it blows me away. I mean, this was produced by Irwin Yablans, who was the producer of Halloween. He came up with the original story for John Carpenter's Halloween. It was written by Tom Holland, who wrote Psycho 2 and would later write and direct movies like Child's Play and Fright Night. The music is by John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. The main theme song, which they play a bunch of times, sung by John Anderson from Yes, and it was directed from Michael Winner, who directed the Charles Bronson Death Wish movies. But it is one of the worst but best movies you will ever, and I mean ever, see. It's called Scream for Help. It was shot partially in New Rochelle, New York, which is close to me and Pete, partially in England, and it is basically an after-school special on crack. Like crack cocaine. I mean, it's very similar to the movie The Stepfather, but years before The Stepfather. And, which I think, was that also, did Tom Holland have something to do with that? I can't remember. But basically, there's a girl, a young, pretty teenage girl named Christy, whose mother has remarried, and it's her stepfather, and she believes that the stepfather, who she does not get along with, is cheating on her mom. So she does the teenage Scooby-Doo sleuth thing to try and investigate, and craziness happens. Like, I don't even want to describe some of the scenes because it'll ruin it for you, but there are scenes in here that I never thought I would see on film. But it's just completely batshit crazy. The best part is it's all played straight.
Oh, really?
It's not for laughs.
Wow.
So it's all unintentional laughs. But this movie is so good that at that 24-hour show, it was in October, of course. It was a very warm day. There was no air conditioning because they'd already switched over to heat. So in the theater, it was very warm. But this movie was so good for the 90 minutes, I forgot about the heat. This movie's so good, when I watched it on Blu-ray, when I first got the Blu-ray like 6 months ago, it was so good. As soon as it ended, I wanted to watch it again. Wow. I mean, it is so fucked up. Again, I don't want to give away too much, but there's tons of boobs. There's sex. There's blood. I mean, it's not really a slasher because you know what's going on, but man, it's just fun. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Scream for Help.
I'm gonna have to see this film.
It's fucking crazy. It's totally insane. I'm
gonna have to go out and find a copy of that.
It's a must-have. I mean, I showed it here, with the virus. I did an outdoor movie night, and I showed it to about 12 people who had never seen it before, and they were like, "Wow, that movie is crazy." And of course, they liked too that it was shot locally. They showed New Rochelle High School and all these other local areas, but it's just nuts. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you like, in America we had the ABC after school specials that were always kind of like warnings about hitchhiking or whatever, and
teen pregnancy,
all that stuff,
underage drinking, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
This completely feels like this, and there's interview with Tom Holland, who wrote the movie, and he totally shits all over Michael Winner. He's like, really? He didn't know how to make my script into a good movie. He's like, because this movie is shit. This movie actually never even got released theatrically in the United States. It went straight to home video in the U.S. It did play in Europe theatrically, so I believe that's where that film print came from. But
you sold me out.
It's a must-see. Yeah, I don't want to give it away, but if you like boobs and blood and just laughing, like it's the ultimate funny movie without trying to be funny, that's Scream for Help.
I'm sold. I'm going to have to check that out. All right. 2006. So, back right around this time, maybe a year or two later or something like that, I was living in a town here in the Hudson Valley and going to a local gym. I belonged to a local gym, and one of the guys who also belonged to the gym that I got to know very, very well was former heavyweight contender Lou Savarese. He's also from the Hudson Valley. And so I don't know, one day Lou and I were talking, we're working out, we're talking, and, talking about boxing. He fought like Evander Holyfield, and he fought George Foreman. He fought all the big guys. He fought like Mike Tyson and all this kind of stuff. So we were talking movies, and we started talking about horror films, and he goes, "Oh, you like horror films?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah." He goes, "Oh, I just wrapped up doing a little indie horror film not long ago." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, it's a film called Knock Knock. You should check it out." And I'm like, okay. So I was like, did it get released theatrically? He goes, nah, straight to video, but you could probably get it on DVD. So I was like, all right. So I went searching for it because I was, Lou's my friend. I'm like, all right, whatever. And I tracked it down. This is it right here. Okay. This is not to be confused with the Knock Knock film,
with
which
Keanu Reeves,
which
was
out.
A remake, actually.
Remake of this or just a remake?
No, it's just a remake of a movie called, someone will tell me, not Death Rage or Death Wish. Death something.
Yeah, who knows? This is a slasher film. If you like slasher films, you probably dig this. So basically, it takes place, I'm assuming it takes place somewhere in New York or New Jersey, because everybody in the film's got this really, really thick either, New York suburb or, Jersey accent, right? And it's like this small town where all of a sudden, like one by one, some of the teenage kids that are all in this clique wind up getting killed, right? And originally they think that the perpetrator is this really weird, slow janitor at the high school. And the guy who, I don't even know what his name is, but the guy who plays the janitor does a fantastic job of playing like the town idiot, right? So it's just, he's so wacky. He barely talks, and he's always like, checking out the girls and just like snooping, he's like really, he's kind of short, he's got curly kind of longish hair, he's overweight, and he just talks like a moron, right? So obviously something's going on with him,
or he's a red herring, one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the way they kind of play it up, right? So, but and I don't want to talk too much about what actually happens, but as it turns out, some really bad incident happened like 10 years prior with, or maybe it was a little bit longer, maybe 20 years prior, with like members of the football team who kind of started beating up him and his best friend, and a big accident happened and all this kind of stuff. So without telling too much of that, but so then all of a sudden there's this killer, and he wears like almost like a Leatherface type of mask. Okay. So right then, lack of originality right off the bat, because you got this guy walking around using all these kind of tools and weapons to kill people, and he's got like a Leatherface thing going on. He doesn't say much of anything, but it's one of those films, and again, I think that was indicative, you've probably seen this a million times, of like the early mid-2000 horror films with all these like really quick cuts and slurs and shit that's annoying as all hell, right?
Totally.
Film is pretty gory.
Okay.
And the chicks in the film are really hot.
I'm sold, and I have never heard of this movie.
The chicks are all really hot. They don't look like they're 16 or 17 or 18 years old. I mean, I think a couple of them are actually porn stars or whatever. Wouldn't surprise me. But there's just no real logic to the film. And so, I have an issue with continuity stuff. So, like, there's one instance where the killer is killing one of the chicks, and he goes to drive like this knife or something into her eyeball socket, right? And you could clearly see the camera's following, and it's going right towards the eye socket, right? And then all of a sudden, like 2 seconds later, you see her strung up on the wall.
And her eyes are fine.
Her eyes are fine, and the knife is in her middle of her head. I'm like, wait a second, that's not what he was doing before. How did it all of a sudden get up there? So that kind of stuff.
But that's indicative of a good bad movie.
Exactly.
That's perfect. Right?
It is. And, there's a lot of stuff like that happens throughout the movie. I mean, the craziest scene in this movie, it's like, so, they portray the janitor guy, the dummy, right? They portray him to be just that, right? So he's living in the house with his mother, who's an older lady, and she obviously coddles him. She knows he's got issues and all that kind of stuff. The police come to question him and all this kind of stuff. But, it's like, oh, I didn't do nothing. Oh, I didn't kill nobody, all this kind of stuff. And then there's this weird-ass scene that comes out of nowhere after, like, all this other stuff happens, where they go back to his room in the house, and there he is, and he's listening to like some death metal album, and he's wearing sunglasses, he's got a joint in his mouth, and he's got an electric guitar that he's like obviously doesn't play because he's just doing like this kind of stuff, whatever, and he's like headbanging all over the room like, wait a second, is it the same guy? And it's just like...
Again, right out of 101, you're like, what the fuck
is going on here?
Good bad movie. All right, I'm sold.
So yeah, I mean, it's one of those films, and I think that if you like really bad slasher films with lots of boobs and gore, I mean, that's what you get here. It's fun if you allow it to be fun, but you're gonna see all the weird kind of things that are going on, or the inconsistencies and all that kind of stuff. But there's a scene in here where this one of the athletes, the school kids, gets like totally eviscerated in the locker room, and then the killer stuffs him upside down in the locker. They open up the locker, and there's his like intestines and all his. He ripped his arm off, and here he is, all his body parts just like stacked up in the locker. So like the coach opens it up, and there's
all the body parts fall out.
It's just like, all
that's
right,
great.
Yeah, so that's
all right. I'm sold.
That's my number 2. Well, here you go. Check it out.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Pete. That is funny. Well, my last one, it could be the best bad movie of all time.
Wow.
I had heard about this movie for years, but again, this was another one similar to Scream for Help that you couldn't find readily. It wasn't streaming anywhere. It was not legally available on DVD. So again, like Scream for Help, I went to the Exhumed Films 24-hour horror marathon. Greatest show on earth. Before this played, actually, I had lost my wallet. True story. Thankfully, I didn't have a ton of cash. And I spent the whole next movie calling all my credit card companies to cancel them. It was a fucking mess. They had to FedEx me a credit card and whatever else. But the point is, the next movie I went in on was this movie. And it was so captivating that for that 90 minutes, I completely forgot that I lost my wallet. I was so engrossed in it. It was originally shot under the title Kung Fu Zombies, but when it was eventually released in theaters in America, it came out under the name Raw Force. Wow. And it is un-fucking believable. It's from like 82, 83. It did get released in theaters in the States. I have the US 1 sheet to prove it. But Kung Fu Zombies is perfect. I mean, it's basically there's a bunch of people on a cruise ship, but it's a really shitty, beat-up cruise ship. Cameron Mitchell, who's been in a shit ton
he's the king of B movies.
Bad B movies. He's the captain of the boat, and they go out on this boat, and one of the stops is Warrior Island, which is like mythical for like some kind of kung fu fighting, and there's a bunch of kung fu people on the boat. And so like, the first half of the movie is people like partying on the boat, and then they stop in like Thailand, and there's hookers and drinking, and one of my favorite bits is two famous B-movie actresses, Jewel Shepard from Return of the Living Dead and a million other things, and Camille Keaton from I Spit on Your Grave, are both in this movie. They have no dialogue, but they just get naked during like one of the crazy party scenes. I mean, there's a ton of boobs. They eventually, without giving it away, they do make it to the island, and there are zombies that do kung fu. And they're also cannibals. Like, there's a cult of, like, these cannibal priests on the island. But it is completely batshit crazy. I mean, even to the point when I watched it the other day, and it was probably my 10th time watching it, there's a few scenes in here, and I'm like, the fuck are they, what are they doing? Like, these characters have no bearing on the rest of the movie. Like what the fuck is going on? And it's just so crazy.
Oh my god!
So much fun.
I must see this.
The movie has some good extras. The disc, some interviews and stuff, and it's a lot of fun. Like Scream for Help, it's just a great bad. I mean, it's terribly done, but so much fun. And again, if you like boobs and blood and like terrible zombies and terrible kung fu. Like, all the guys in this, it's like, these guys don't... I probably know as much karate as these guys. I mean, it's so fucking bad. But that's what makes it a good bad movie. so good. And yeah, Raw Force, I would definitely.
Well, I guess if Hammer could do Kung Fu Vampires,
yes, this is even crazier than that
because that movie.
That one's nuts. Crazy. We could have easily done Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires for sure.
Well, I need to see that. But we're going to stick on zombies here. And this is also fairly recent, 2008. So, zombies, porn stars, strippers. Sounds like a pretty good combination, right? So we're talking about zombie strippers here. And yes, that is Jenna Jameson. That, at the time when this came out, everybody was into zombie anything, right? And as was I. And this movie's got, Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, right? Jenna Jameson in the starring role. You got her. Is she still with Tito Ortiz? I don't know.
No, they are long divorced.
Okay, so they were together at this time, and he plays the bouncer of the strip club here. He's got absolutely nothing to do. I think he's got one line in the whole film. He actually plays just like a total creep in this film. But
I think he just ran for office, and I think he won.
Really?
Yeah.
Go figure. I don't know. But Robert Englund plays the manager of the strip club. Long story short, there is this big to-do in the military. All these countries are at war with each other. So the U.S. government, the U.S. military decides that they're going to create this super soldier to go fight all of our wars. And of course,
totally original.
Are zombies, right? Figure, hey, why not, right? But of course, they didn't think that maybe you can't really control these zombies. So of course, there is an outbreak. All these zombies get out, right? So right next door to where they had a whole bunch of these zombies holed up and where they were experimenting on them, of course, is a strip club, right? So because
that's where you would have a lab right next to that part of town where there's a strip club.
Exactly, right? So of course, the head stripper is Jenna Jameson, and got all these other porn stars are in the film, right. All that kind of stuff, right? And so a couple of the zombies break into the strip club. And one of them, and just goes and sits in the audience, right? And so one of them actually attacks Jenna Jameson, and and by the way, she's new to the entire film,
right?
And as is all are the other ones. So they show plenty of pole dancing and all that kind of stuff. So she gets bitten by one of the zombies, and she comes back to life. They kick the zombie guy out of the bar, right? Never mind kill him. They just get out of here. Look what you did. So they think she's dead. She comes back to life, but no, she doesn't come back to life as an aimless zombie. She comes back to a life as I'm still a stripper, right? I want to consume human flesh, but you know what? I still want to do my job. So she comes out. She's back. She's got blood all in her. She's got all the nasty teeth and everything. And she comes out. She's a zombie now. She does her pole dance, takes off her clothes, and then the whole gimmick thing is one by one she starts turning the other dancers into zombies. And now the whole plot of this movie is the guys who come to the club, everybody starts hearing the story about these new wild and crazy dancers at the strip club.
Right.
It's must see viewing, right? And so every night after night, the big highlight is that one of the or all of the strippers will then go and grab someone from the audience to take them backstage, and they would bite them and kill them, and then they would throw them into this room where they would turn into zombies, and there's this whole room of zombies. But the guys who frequent the club are like, oh my god, it's just so great, it's been kicked up a notch, this is awesome. So they Robert Englund is all happy because he's making shitloads of money because people are banging at the doors to get in to see this new crazy thing that they've got going on there. So, but the funniest, and again, I'm going to give this scene away just because this will be the hook for everybody. So there's this throughout the whole film, Jenna Jameson's character and this other one of the veteran strippers there, who I forget her name, she's hot as well. There's this competition between the two of them. So later in the film, they're both now zombies. They still have this competition. So there's this whole scene where they get into this fight on stage. And again, all filled with guys in the front going nuts. And they're trying to better each other on the pole dancing and all this kind of stuff. But then it starts to get physical. They start scratching each other, clawing each other. And there's a scene where Jenna Jameson gets knocked down, right? So she's on the floor. The other one's sitting up there all this kind of stuff. And Jenna Jameson takes a handful of golf balls. She pulls down her pants, her panties. They don't actually show it, but she sticks the golf balls in her vagina
and shoots them
at her and starts shooting them at her. When that doesn't prove to be good enough, she goes and takes pool balls from the pool table and starts doing the same thing there. So this whole scene of her sticking them in and trying to hit the other girl.
Wild. Yeah, I was gonna say I remember watching this movie. I remember being disappointed. But Pete's description, I think it may have sold me on watching it again.
It's just so wacky, and again, if you love, and there's tons of gore. If you love zombie gore and hot naked porn stars jumping around on stage, I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. The acting is absolutely awful. I mean, Robert Englund must have really needed lunch money or something, right? You know, because like why he would have agreed. Why
would he
this.
slum to do this?
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because the production values of the film aren't too bad. It's just that. There's no plot basically, and you know, then at the end, all the military people come to save the day, and two of them are completely. So here you have this group of soldiers, and there's like 3 or 4 guys, and they're dressed in all the normal army garb with the machine guns and all that kind of stuff. And then one of them is a Latino girl, and of course she's wearing a tank top and she's got the headband, so kind of like the take on like Michelle Rodriguez.
Right.
And then the other one is this totally smoking hot blonde, and with even a skimpier tank top, right? And she's got the army hat on. She's got the big machine gun, and it's just like
that's Pete's doing a great job of selling it. That's for sure.
It's just so crazy. It's absolutely nuts. So and there's the back of the DVD. But you know, Jenna Jameson looks absolutely smoking hot in it as always, and yeah, it's just like I said, naked porn stars, and zombie gore, and that's what you got. Not much else. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, these are all definitely, good. There's something, they're all bad movies, but there's something appealing to it.
Which is
the difference of, say, like a bad movie, which I just saw this and absolutely hated it. And it's a new movie. So that I didn't like it at all, so that's just a bad movie. But these are all good bad movies because there's something there that makes it still fun.
They're bad, but they're entertaining, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
And there's a ton of horror movies that fall into that category. They're so campy, so corny, no plot, no.
I mean, like budget. All the Rubber Monster movies we just went over. Those are all other than Humanoids from Deep. That's just a good movie. But like the other ones, they're good bad movies.
My copy should be in any day now.
Oh, you ordered it?
Oh, hell yeah!
That's a must-have. Yeah, I love that movie.
I had it on VHS. Way back in the day, but I never replaced it. And now I'm like, after you talked about it, I'm like, I miss having that. Yeah, that's good. So there you have it, everybody. 30 some odd minutes of really bad horror turkeys, right? This post-Thanksgiving season.
Yeah.
I would urge you to check out any of these, if for nothing else, to get a laugh for an hour and a half.
Definitely. They're all fun.
Yeah. But if you guys have some good ones that we didn't mention today or other ones that you'd recommend, please put them in the comments below. Chris and I will be checking out the comments to see, because you know what?
I'm sure there's something we haven't seen.
I'm going to say there's probably some recommendations where we're like, I need to check that one out. So anyway, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube.
All the damn time.
There you go. So stay tuned. We got more of this kind of stuff coming up. Monsters Den episodes happening over the next couple of weeks. We've got Rich Catino coming back on the show. We're going to do part 2 of Stephen King film adaptations. Rich will be joining Chris and myself also to do a film all on stop motion photography effects, big giant monsters or regular sized monsters, all using stop motion photography. Those are some classic ones. And then Chris and I are talking about doing a show. I'll let you explain it, but about films that we used to not.
Oh, yes. I was talking to Pete earlier about, because sometimes, of course, your opinions change on movies. And I was mentioning to Pete a particular movie. It's actually part of a franchise that, as a kid in the early '80s, I hated the original, but I really loved the sequel. And over time, I totally flip-flopped. Now, I hate the sequel, but I absolutely love the original. I think it's one of the greatest horror movies of all time, which people always did, but I kind of, as a 12-year-old, I kind of didn't see the appeal.
Yeah.
But now, of course, I do.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the idea that,
So that show will be a combination of films that we either used to love, now hate, or used to hate, now love, and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be coming up over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that, and lots more stuff, especially on the music side. We got lots of things happening over the next few weeks, so stay tuned. And for Chris Allo, I am Pete Pardo. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.